The Deceiver. Once upon a time in a village there lived two brothers. The elder one was named Richard, and the younger one was David. They were real brothers, but they were completely different in every way. Richard was unattractive, greedy, and deceitful, while David was handsome, healthy, simple, and virtuous. Their mother had passed away when they were very young, and now their father had also left this world. Their father, a poor shopkeeper, owned a small shop. Naturally, it wasn't a source of great income to build a big house or buy lots of goods. When he died, he left behind three things for his sons: a goat, a blanket, and a coconut tree. These three things had to be divided between the brothers. David was a simple man who couldn't comprehend his elder brother's cunning. He agreed to his suggestion that the three items would be shared equally between them. First, the division of the goat began. Richard said, "If we cut the goat into two, it will die. So, you take the front part, and I'll take the back part." The younger brother thought, "The front is better. In races, the one ahead wins the prize." Happy with the idea, he agreed to own the front part of the goat. Now, David would cut grass all day and bring water from the river to feed the goat, since its mouth belonged to him. Richard, on the other hand, enjoyed the milk every day, since the goat's udders were part of his share. Poor David, becoming thinner by the day, while Richard grew plumper and healthier. Their neighbor, a kind old man who was a friend of their late father, could no longer bear to see this injustice. One day, he called David aside and said, "You fool! Can't you see that the goat eats your grass, but your brother drinks all the milk? Take my advice." And he whispered something into David's ear. That evening, when Richard sat down to milk the goat, David picked up a stick and started prodding the goat. The goat jumped and kicked, making it impossible for Richard to milk her. Irritated, Richard said, "David, stop this." David calmly replied, "Why should I? The front part is mine. You drink all the milk, don't you? Do I ever say anything to you?" Left with no choice, Richard finally gave in. "Fine, stop disturbing the goat. From now on, we'll share the milk equally." David hit the goat lightly with the stick and said, "And you'll also have to give her half the food she eats." Richard unwillingly agreed to this as well. From then on, the goat was fed equally, and the milk was shared between them. However, Richard's greed didn't disappear. He came up with another plan, this time involving the blanket. He said to David, "Let's divide the blanket too. You use it during the day, and I'll use it at night." David once again fell for the cunning suggestion. Since it was hot during the day and he was busy with the chores, he didn't need the blanket. However, at night he shivered in the cold, while Richard slept comfortably. After a few days, the kind old neighbor intervened again. He whispered another clever plan to David. The next day, David soaked the blanket in water just before sunset. When Richard picked it up to use at night, he screamed, "What is this? Why did you wet the blanket?" David calmly replied, "The blanket is mine during the day. When I saw it was dirty, I washed it. And from now on, I'll wash it daily." Left with no choice, Richard pleaded, "Fine, my brother. Let's both use it at night so that neither of us feels cold." The last thing remaining to be divided was the coconut tree. Richard came up with yet another cunning plan and convinced David to agree that the upper half of the tree would belong to him and the lower half to David. Once again, David fell for the trick. He fetched buckets of water from the river every day to water the tree, while Richard enjoyed the coconuts. This went on for some time until the kind old neighbor could no longer stand the injustice. he gave David one last brilliant idea. The next day, while Richard was perched on the tree plucking coconuts, David picked up an axe and started chopping the tree at its base. "What are you doing?" Richard shouted in panic. "I'm cutting my part of the tree," David replied. "The bottom half is mine. I can cut it or water it as I please." Richard, now frightened for his life, cried out, "Stop, brother. Please don't do this. I promise never to deceive you again." And this time, Richard kept his promise. He was deeply ashamed of his actions and never tried to cheat David again. Moral of the story: deception and greed lead to ruin, while fairness and cleverness ensure justice.